Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for the Q&A for Fresh Kill, and I am so delighted and honored to be introducing the filmmaker behind Fresh Kill. Shu Lea Cheang is a Taiwanese American artist and filmmaker who lived and worked in New York City in the 80s and 90s until relocating to the Eurozone in 2000. And Cheang's work employs film, video, net-based installation, and interface to explore ethnic stereotyping, the nature and excesses of popular media, institutional and especially governmental power, race relations, and sexual politics. And I am thrilled to welcome to our Q&A, Shu Lea Cheang.
Hi.
Shu. How are you?
Very good. Good to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. You're in Paris at the moment?
Yes. I've been settled in Paris, yes.
I wanted to start our conversation by asking you about, the research that went into making a Fresh Kill. It touches on the Fresh Kill's landfill in Staten Island, which closed in 2000. How long did it take to just develop the script of Fresh Kill, and also how extensive the research was that went into making it?
For sure. I think, they've been through the New York City through the 80s and 90s. I would say I have always been preparing to make this feature film, Fresh Kill. Of course, at the end, the film actually makes quite a lot of different plot, different characters, and mess up a lot of sort of racial stereotype, typical racial stereo casting. So at the end, it also, for me, is very New York at the time, the 80s with also with the street actions, the homeless people, and the particular media manipulation at the time. And at the end, finally, is more of the toxic environment and that we live in at the time, or continually. So yeah, I do feel the research for it was almost like throughout the life I've been living in New York, and finally able to find a form of a feature film form to combine all these different topics together.
And in particular, the creative team behind Fresh Kill, because I saw that Jessica Hagedorn, the renowned Filipino writer and novelist of Dog Eaters, wrote the screenplay for Fresh Kill. How did this creative collaboration and also the rest of the creative team come together?
Yeah, Jessica Hagedorn, I have known her, and I have worked with her also on another performance piece called Color Schemes. That was around 1985. So I was really working with this non-traditional casting. I don't know, I think we don't talk about this anymore, but at that time, this is a so-called, whenever you cast colored people, it's called non-traditional casting. So I did a piece on the idea of demystify the non-traditional casting. So Jessica Hagedorn is one of them. I was always been working or knowing the scene of the downtown performance in New York City. So Jessica, of course, was also very active in the theater performance scene at the time. I actually asked her if she would write the script with me. And we went through a very rigid, I guess would be like a whole year of very intense writing together. It was quite a wonderful experience, yes. Of course, sorry, you asked about our crew. At the end, we also got producer Jennifer Fong, John Woo that came in, and also we have associate producer Sherry Freelow, who is now working at the Sundance Film Festival. And so at that time, I think somehow we became quite a woman crew. We actually got a cinematographer, Jen Castle, freshly out of the Prince studio in Minneapolis, and she kind of also joined us to make the film. The film was actually at the end shot in 35 millimeter. Was quite a venture for independent film production at the time. So at the end, I think we have a very female crew together. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the things that makes Fresh Kill remarkable, both behind, the camera and in front of the camera. You'd mentioned, what they referred to at that time as non-traditional casting. Were there any pushback that you encountered? And in addition to that, were there any particular challenges that you had to deal with in getting Fresh Kill made?
Yeah, I think the fundraising does take a few years. And so it took a few years for us to raise the fund we need. And as we say, that we decide to go for shooting in 35 millimeter, which, again, is pump up the budget quite a bit. So it's good. And then by the time we finished the film shooting, I think the whole world is turning digital. So that was like also around 93, 92, 93 was also the introduction of the digital editing. So we actually got into working with Avid for editing, so it's interesting, shot in digital, shot in 35, edit digital, and then go back to the point. So that whole process, yeah.
You've said that Fresh Kill was motivated by, quote, a desire to depict the relationship between the media and environmental racism, drawing parallels between the dumping of industrial toxic waste in the third world with the dumping of garbage TV programs into third world countries. So while the Fresh Kills landfill itself closed in 2001, do you think the general situation has evolved, either for better or for worse? And do you feel that this issue is being properly addressed by the current generation at the present time?
Oh yeah, I think we do. At Fresh Kill, I deal with industrial waste. At the moment, I'm writing a script for a new film, and I'm dealing with electronic trash. And not to talk about the most amazing side these days is the plastic waste, right? So I think human being cannot avoid generating the waste. It seems to come with the nature. I think there is different strategies being thought of how to deal with the waste. Or at the end, I think there is a new realization or kind of deal with your own waste in your own backyard, rather than earlier days. I think a lot of export to African country, the electronic trash, that whole process. I actually don't see how the cycle gonna end. Yeah.
I remember I read that Fresh Kill premiered at the Berlinale, and then it played at Toronto. How I'm curious to know, how did the queer community respond to the film at the time, and in the years since, in recent screenings of the film, including now at New Fest? How is there any difference in how it's being received?
I remember when it was first shown in Berlinale, it was not particularly embraced by the lesbian community. I think, for one thing, I think at that time, the queer community is, we don't really, at that time, there was not really so much talk about queer as a community or queer, I think so. You had this lesbian, gay, lesbian, separation group and all that. It's not only Fresh Kill, but I realize a lot of my film for the queer community is they cannot really quite grasp how to categorize it. As my producer would say, Shu Lea, make a film for lesbian, make a film for gay. We can go anywhere. But when you make a film, you also have lesbian, you have queer, you have trans, then you're not going anywhere. People get confused. And I have always pondering about these questions. Is it possible that we are so conditioned to fix our sexuality? I think for a long time, going to gay and lesbian film festival, what upset me will be like, okay, here you go. There is gay film screening, all the gay audience go into the cinema, or a lesbian film, vice versa. So it seems like, I guess my ambition will be to how to mix up this whole situation.
And do you feel like more recently it's being more embraced or better understood, at least?
I feel I recently produced another film or directed another film called Fui Zero, which was released in 2017, also premiered at Berlinale. The film was very well received by the queer community in Europe. However, the film still yet to really officially enter into U.S. market or any U.S. festival per se. So I think there is just a bit of gap here still.
Fresh Kill is considered a notable work of new queer cinema in the U.S. How do you think queer cinema is now? And how is it different from that time in the 90s?
Oh, I'm very happy to for yourself, see for yourself. You are now, you can write about your own story. You can act and direct your own story. I think this is remarkable. Of course, it really has come a long way in terms of the queer cinema being, able to also claim a market. So it's like.
Yeah.
Finally, you have a market to show your film and to present your film. I think it's all for the best.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fresh Kill. I'm curious to hear about the influences that you had, that inspired Fresh Kill, whether cinematic influences or perhaps artists that work in other disciplines or media that.
Yeah, I think I come from living through the 80s and 90s in New York City, particularly in downtown. I was living on Bowery. I was associated with the scene of the independent filmmaker scene in the East Village, Beth B, Jarmusch, and the Spike Lee, this whole crowd. So somehow I take on probably I didn't really follow the rule of the traditional narrative. At the same time, also I have a kind of study in New American cinema, more of experimental cinema. So I think that also affects me, particularly a certain kind of glitch aesthetics, I guess. So I think if we want to talk about the influence, it is really not particularly from one particular director, but it is the kind of menu at the time that who I'm associated with, the community I'm associated with, that informed the way the film was made. Yeah.
And among contemporary artists, from the works that you've encountered or seen in recent years, who excites you the most? Either filmmakers or artists working other disciplines.
Aha, who excites me the most? That's a big question. Uh, there's actually so many.
Mm,
How could I say? I would say I probably didn't want to name a name, but I would consider myself is among uh, certain contemporaries that who I admire and
mhm.
who I look for in terms of how our work advance together. So um, there's really some really young artists and also different queer artists, um, color artists. But I would probably want to make a list of names rather than simply
Yeah,
identify a particular name. Sorry about this. Yeah.
no worries. Yeah, you've left the US in 2000, and you've been living in Europe, I believe, for the last 20 years. Um, what's the difference between living in the US and not living in the US?
Uh, yeah, I think when you live in New York City, I think usually I even at that time I thought like, oh, I'll never leave New York City. New York is the greatest. I can never leave here. But finally, I left, and I'm quite happy living and working in Europe. Finally I took on Paris as my residency. However, I'm working in Berlin a lot. I'm connected with different community here in Europe. I have different art spaces, alternative spaces that I'm working with. At the same time, getting different commissions to do my work. So I think at the time of leaving New York City also was a way to try to kind of get away from this cycle of waiting for the grant, to make your film. It's just like the process of writing the grant proposal, waiting for the money to come down so that you can move. I just decided I had to stop it, and so at the moment I feel like with money, without money, I still making work. And I have a great producer in Berlin, Jürgen Brunin. I have French producer I'm working with now, Isabel Alvers. And so I do feel it's the most important how you kind of form your associate, in every possible way of working is to form the associates, the alliance. I have a true of great queer performers that I work with, and pretty much in Berlin, I have the editor, the musician, the producer,
Yeah,
so it's really super feeling, yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, it sounds like you've been very busy. Can you tell us about a new project that you're working on?
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually in the middle of my fourth feature film, and it's called Yuki. And it will be a science fiction, viral or reality cinema. I just finished the third draft of the script, but I think I still have a ways to go. At the same time, the film would take on shooting in a very different form, like shot in sort of using 3D technology, using game engine to create landscapes, and the film is all about virus.
Very interesting. This is your fourth feature.
Yeah.
Can you do you feel like your cinematic aesthetic or sensibility has evolved since Fresh Kill for
Because
you?
yeah, I think every film is such a challenge,
Mhm.
and every film I try to work differently. So in this sense, and so far every film I make in different country, Fresh Kill in New York, IKU in Tokyo, and Fui Zero in Berlin, and the new film I think it's gonna be between France and Berlin. So uh, it's for me. it is always a challenge, you know, so you kind of back to zero. And for me to, you know, at the moment, of course, I'm still fundraising, writing the script, and trying to figure out how to do it. Technically, it's a very big challenge for me, this new film. Sometimes I feel a bit frustrated, for sure, particularly being writing the script about virus during this pandemic time. So it's been quite a heartfelt experience. But I think I do feel that I need to make this film. You know, I have an urgency to make this film now. Yeah.
And having seen, Fresh Kill and what an achievement it is and it was, yeah, I'm very excited, as I'm sure the New Fest audiences are also very much looking forward to Yuki when it's ready to come
Yeah.
out.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. That'd be great to show. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shu Lea, for gracing us for this post-screening Q&A for Fresh Kill.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful to meet you, and thank you to New Fest and the festival programming committee for hosting this special conversation with Shu Lea Cheang.
Thank you so much. Yeah.